Hello. So I recently watched this entire video on my iPad, and I have to say there's a problem um, because people always get three-dimensional representations of a four-dimensional space completely wrong. The Klein bottle is a mental block that everyone exists has because you're thinking about a Klein bottle instead of actual fourth dimensional topography. So, this is a big problem with people who work with mathematicians and topics like all this different stuff about how it can be mapped and everything else. And it makes sense that you think of it, well, the series started with the beginning and the same endpoint. So naturally, it makes sense to have a Mobius strip that is a continuous loop, and instead of being the torus that was generated earlier in the video, which is interesting about this dome also, but the thing is, you forget about making that shape not in two dimensions. But then, what is the conjecture? What is the entire, like, how do you even conceptualize what you're trying to work with? Because although we've seen this, and then we take the mapping and we say, oh, yes, it is in fact, of course, a Klein bottle.
The next gen online collect.
Just Okay, so this is a sin of mathematics where we take a fourth dimensional function and we put it into into three dimensions, but we don't follow the actual like guidelines of what it is that would be happening in fourth dimensions. So unfortunately, we end up with this kind of thing, and Klein bottle is really I'm not saying it's not beautiful. It is beautiful. It's neat. However,
Side could be moved around in some way to end up on the outside. If you know.
yeah, and that's interesting to say that it corresponds with a now don't there's a problem here is that what you don't realize is that's just a beaker. Yeah, you think it's not, but of course in three-dimensional space, right? If you simply take what is that outside and inside, if you were to try to figure out about how to squish it and squash it such that somehow you have a straight object instead of a curvy one, you'd be surprised what you find. Um, and that's more real towards what's happening in fourth dimensional space. So naturally in fourth dimensional space, you can think of things as intersecting, but you don't think about them correctly, and I'll prove it to you because I'll look up a 4D cube. And I'll show you the sin number 2. This is the worst sin everyone commits. Look at this object, say that's a 4D cube, or this one, or this one, or that one. Although this one here is kind of getting close to that. They're trying to really understand it. They might actually get it right. But this, however, is a sin of mathematics. This is wrong, mentally. The exact opposite of what you ever want to do is say that this is a representation of a 4D cube. It can't be that. Although they're missing a couple lines. Forget about the render. Look at this shape. This is the same shape. It's just fully rendered in three-dimensional space. And this is 4D cubing. Lies. That's not how it works. You don't know 4 dimensions. I'm sorry. However, look, this is fascinating. It's fascinating in the fact that you can look at the topology, you see that the all the different lines have not disconnected in any way, and they have somehow reformatted in such a way that it looks like a 4D. This is what they say is, quote unquote, a 4D cube. Okay? It's complete wrong. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a 4D cube right there in front of me that I can show you what it actually would be like. Because, again, it's a lot more simple than this, first of all. Also, please understand this idea of the shape being able to warp like this. Please understand that what this is right here, this shape, this intermediate, this is just nonsense. Okay? It's absolute nonsense. So what this animation is people doing math, like actual arithmetic and stuff. They come to these conclusions, they think that this is what it is, and somehow they end up with this absolute abomination. So what's a real 4D cube? A true 4D cube, what happens is, the correct way to understand a 4D cube is to have a set of lenses inside the cube, okay? As you look at it from different directions, you will see the color change because different light is able to be produced and go through it depending on the angle of attack. Can you envision that in your mind? Because it's sort of like this, I think. But no, look how ridiculous this is. This is nothing even. No, forget this. Forget this. Please forget this. This is, this is not correct. This is a lot of people's PhDs and everything else. Just throw it out the window, please. It's not a 4D cube. 4 dimensions is only like if you have a single physical object and then suddenly you start including light or sound or heat. It's another thing inside of the normal three-dimensional space. But it has a fourth element, which is representation of different sectors of it that could be either hot or cold, and it doesn't change in any way like this. And a regular cube doesn't have this kind of dimensionality. And I reject it emphatically because it's so absolutely wrong. Not because of, okay, anyone can make an animation, okay? And it's possible to show people what what a representation of an animation of what they assume a four-dimensional cube would be. Expanding regular space, but also in some other direction, right? But what really is happening is layers. What truly happens in a four-dimensional cube is layers of things. This is nothing. This is nonsense. Tesseract nonsense. I'm sorry.
This cube can help you think in full.
I have responded to this, and no, unfortunately. This is wrong. This is not a Tesseract. This is so the correct. Oh God, I haven't watched this, but I watched it, and it's like, yeah, that's true. It's not. 4D misinformation. I did not know about or remember this video. I have seen it back then. You know what? We're going there. Yeah. When the video was out originally, I commented, try looking in a prism. Because I freaking have always known this crap. The thing is, okay, this is a response. Remember, this is a response to Free Blue One Brown talking about this. And this is what he has to say.
Here's a question that nobody in the world knows the answer to.
This is wrong. Because the problem is, you're not transforming the topology of something that is four-dimensional, right? Like the Klein bottle, correctly, so that it is represented in three-dimensional space, right? Now, someone made a hat, and that hat is beautiful. It's great. You can keep on folding it and folding it and folding it, and it's just a hat. But also, like, it's a knitted thing. It's a physical, three-dimensional thing. Klein bottle hat. Where the fuck am I going? Whatever. Where is the boy? Where's the man? Is that the that's there he is! Love this guy. Why haven't I subscribed to him since I reactivated made a different channel? Oh wait, hold on. Cliff? Wait, this is not the channel. This is a different channel. That was a response to his video, but what's the video? Oh no. Wait. Shut up. Do you have a link to the video? Oh my god, why do you not? Oh god, that's a sin. What? Cliff Stoll. Okay, hold on. I need to find Cliff Stoll. Yeah, dude. Freaking guy, man. This guy, like, Numberphile. Am I subscribed to Numberphile? Am I subscribed to Cliff Stoll? I better be subscribed to Numberphile. I used to look. I don't know what that's about. What is she? What the? Okay. Anyway, what is this? AT&T Tech Channel? What? Anyway, Numberphile. Great thing. So it's curious and everything else. Whatever. Blah. And freaking get me out of that video. Wherever the hell I was. And it's like, I'll be right back. So the problem is, again, the way that you don't understand a four-dimensional space or something that also occupies 3D space but is, in a sense, separate from it, is that you have this idea of a 4D cube, you get it wrong, you mass produce the representation of 4D cube, and you say it is correct, and unfortunately, or it is the best that we can do, but unfortunately that's still not correct. But then with this video that happened months ago, not even long ago, not as long ago, and yeah, it's, what exactly did I say? Oh, right, it's not that, it's the other thing. It's like how everyone shows an idea of a 4D cube wrongly. The change doesn't happen as another cube linked with outer lines, but the cube is changing color. If you expand the colorful cube, which is 4D idea, towards the Klein bottle or hats, wink will nod, there is no intersection. See, the problem is I need a representation of what this is. The best thing I can tell you, the best thing I can think of is lenses, right? Where you have this thing that, given a certain amount of, um, like if you take a magnifying glass, right? And you tilt it, the amount of light inside as it is being tilted is changed into different amounts of warping depending on the angle of the tilt. And that is light intersecting the physical space of the magnifying glass, coming out in different ways based off of the direction that it originally came through compared to like a flat magnifying glass, you know. where you can't see anything because it's totally sideways. Ha. But a straight on magnifying glass, and then you tilt it. It's very simple to know that there is this different way that light works with that. It's the light itself changing. And it's another dimension of the magnifying glass itself. If you have that same shape, but you make it opaque, light isn't a factor. But because it's see-through, it does have a complete. But the other thing is you can make shapes that as you twist them, they change color. There's all sorts of ways you can do that. Or by turning a disc, you can change the color of the outgoing light because of the polarity of the disc, the way it's designed. People have done that. They've done entire videos of this weird rainbow tube. Let me show you that. It shouldn't be hard to find this thing. Oh God, what's that? It also is Veritasium. Yeah, no, not that. Not this. You're veering away from what it is. What are you talking about? What do you mean you don't know what I'm talking about? Yeah, that's weird. No, no, no. Where is it? There it is. This one. This is the one. Again, it's a free blue one brown. It was so interesting. Veritasium also did a part of it, and it's like this tube, based on the way that the polarization and stuff is happening on one side, it changes how the light is doing all sorts of things as it goes through it. Because it's entering at a different angle, and then that changes based on the crystal structure. I think there's sugar in it or something. And I was like, that's amazing. That was fantastic a year ago. And this is a Klein bottle. That right there is a true Klein bottle. Stuff is happening in the inner set of the bottle, changing because of a single input difference. But it's all the way that the shapes work is just amazing.
But before it gets there, it passes through a linearly polarizing filter. And what that means, basically, is that if you look at all of the light waves beyond the point of that filter, those waves are only going to be wiggling in one direction, say up and down. And don't worry, in a few minutes we're going to go into much more detail about what specifically...
I don't want to address that. Let's just look at this and see how cool it is.
Tube. And the other thing I want to draw...
That is awesome, and it's just because of how light is adapting to its environment, changing as it goes through the tube. It's all made with the same materials inside, but because of where light hits it, it changes like that.
Your attention to is the color that's coming out of the tube after it passes through that second filter.
It's all because after it goes through the first one, it goes in and it becomes it just keeps bouncing in different directions. Those directions are what make those different colors. And then once it's able to get on the outside, and by the way, this is the same technology that they were able to use to make a visualization of electrons because they're constantly changing the frequency of the light such that it's not just different um, in the beats of light photons per second, but there's like this whole wave of spectrum of light that they change, and discrepancies in how it changes can show you the exact visual representation of electrons. And that's fantastic. Talking about femtoseconds and all this nonsense. But like, people are yet to figure out all these different things. This is a Klein bottle. Don't get me wrong. This is a Klein bottle. Okay. The only thing that's changing, the physical properties are all the same. The only thing that's changing is the light and how it moves through the tube. You call it a tube. This is a Klein bottle. And when you understand that, you understand there can be the wiggles without. So where was my response back then? Oh, look, there he is, Steve Mould. But where's mine? I know I'm in here. I have to be in here. There's no way I'm not in here. Where is me? Come on. Did I make my response when I was dead? Maybe I did. No, I've seen this video. I know this one. Where's my response? Oh God, it has to be in here. I mean, you go back to when this was posted, and it's like, how long ago was this posted? A year ago, right? So if you go back to when, where is my response? That's crazy. I had to have given a response to this. It was too cool not to give a response to it. I've seen it. I had to tell them something about it. Maybe, okay, let me explain something to you. Okay? Sometimes when people make a video okay, hold on. Oh, was it him? Was it Steve Mould who did the thing and I gave a response? There I am! There I am! Steve Mould, you made this video years ago. That's not educational. Dude, Steve Mould made this video. Literally. The exact same thing. The only difference between his video and this is that the tube is an elongated version of what Steve Mould did, which is he just had two different filters. That's all. He just had two filters. So this is all about four-dimensional space and stuff. But the thing is, and I hate to point this out, that's my response. That's the only response. What is this? Did I give a response to this? No. Okay. So I did give a response to this. There I am. Freaking year ago. But I hate to think that I didn't have something profound to say about specifically whatever this is. And I'm stuck awake. I can't sleep. I'm not groggy at all. I'm sure that I had some kind of thing to say about this. But like, you'd think I would have. Quantum physics, let's go. It's just tiny physics, honey. The quantum doesn't matter. It's just small. But quantum physics can help you understand how the Klein bottle is not actually the correct representation of the thing. Well, okay, here's the thing, right? Though, if raise the Klein bottle is an object in three-dimensional space. It represents transformations that are happening in three-dimensional space. The problem is, besides showing you this video and this weird
As we rotate the first filter, you rotate through a family of distinct hues. And it doesn't have to be the first filter. If you rotate that second filter, you also rotate through these various different colors.
yeah, because the angle is changing as it goes through the filter, as well as how it goes through the tube. In fact, every bit of the tube is considered to be like a filter, in that every bit of it is transforming how the light is moving through it. And so, knowing that, you're really just working with a bunch of filters. And it's really not more different than just turning one filter or turning the other filter, like in Steve Moll's video. And then Steve Moll did not even realize that's what it was. He didn't respond. He still doesn't know the realization. And also, the Veritasium and Derek doesn't understand that you can go faster than the wind video is how you can go faster than the speed of light. But he'll figure it. He might even figure that out. Does this beam spiral? Okay, let me explain to you what a beam of coherent light is. I gave it a thumbs up because, first of all, I don't think it just spirals. Although the design, the physical design and the way that each crystal being the same in the emulsion of light water or salt water, sugar water. I mean, what do you think light is? It is it starts as a straight beam, and then it goes, like, yeah, it will just do things. But the thing is, I think it would be more, depending on the size of the beam, I think it would be more crazy than just spiraling, if that makes any sense. Like, the problem of truly understanding and representing how the light interacts in the sugar water is like, you gotta have a proper, like, totally zoomed in on each crystal and whatever else, and how the light bends off of it and everything else. And, like, you gotta think of all these different little tiny reflectors, right? The photons are doing all that stuff, bouncing off of all these different little specifically shaped things. And the way that they go through is the way that is the least bouncy until they hit something else that then does bounce it. And the more angles and things that you put into it of whatever distinct direction, you realize the original filter is changing the direction that it's able to move, right? So you can't just, the problem is you can't just think of it as it's, lasers are more discrete than photons in the fact that their wobble is smaller, slightly. Their wobble is like, because of light being as big as it is, once you go down to like X-rays or whatever else, other things, any amount of like pho- any amount of like, you can go to other um, ranges of electromagnetic spectrum, and that is also a different interaction than what would happen with regular just visible light. Because visible light going in and going out of this works just fine. Lasers, however, are different. So, the thing about lasers is that they would also change, they probably would change the structure of the sugar in the tube as well. I'm pretty sure. Like, you would get, uh, like, you would get some serious, what do you call it? Clumping is the thing that comes to mind. I don't know how to put it otherwise. And it's like, I don't know, like, you shine a laser into some sugar water and find out what happens to it. You can get those little laser pointers or whatever. It's like, um, it's a whole thing. I can't wait for the final video, your animations and stuff. Yeah, well, yeah. Why sugar wire twists? Steve Mold video. I was like, who did this? Veritasium or Steve Mold? I don't remember. Geniuses. People working on these things, they think of how to represent things, and they're kind of cool. Whatever. If you found this interesting, it's over in the Science Me playlist, where a lot of our science stuff happens. Talk about, where did we start? We started with a different question altogether. Let's go back again to the beginning.
Suppose you have some closed continuous curve, which essentially means some squiggle you could draw on paper without lifting the pen, that ends where it starts. If you can find 4 points somewhere on this loop that make the vertices of a square, it's called an
Is it flat paper?
inscribed square of the loop. And the unsolved question is whether every possible closed continuous loop like this necessarily has an inscribed square. The question was originally posed by Otto Toeplitz in 1911, and it's commonly known as the inscribed square problem. One of my all-time favorite pieces of math, easily in the top 5, is a very beautiful proof for a simpler version of this question, asking instead whether you can necessarily find an inscribed rectangle. The argument is originally due to Herbert Vaughan, and as a spoiler, our discussion here is going to lead you to think about this shape.
Okay. So the thing about transforming the question in such a way that you would say a square specifically, well then, the squiggle has to, in some fashion, represent the simplest solution is a triangular squiggle that has dimensions that are very, very limited in its diversity, such that it's similar to a triangle. And if you can, it's so similar to a triangle that you would almost say it is one. But you wouldn't, because it has a bit of a squiggle to it. So the triangle has properties that are so simple that the distances of any 4 points such that they make a square in it. Okay. The very simplest answer, right? You would think is there. But then you could simply draw a triangle and say, can you ever make a square inside of a triangle? And of course, it's impossible. You would think. So let's look that up for a second here. Oh my God, it's a result. And you see, you can come up with this solution such as like this, which happened 5 years ago. Now, I remember, there's another one. And so if you have wobbles, even in a triangle, then you could possibly, right? This is the simplest freaking thing. Having a square inside of a triangle, right? It works because of perhaps the type of triangle that it is. That it's this type of triangle. 3 ways to draw squares inside triangles. However, is there a triangle that, because of this entire proof, can you find a triangle type that does not include a square? And that, in my brain, simply add a few squiggles, and you have the same idea as what he's trying to do with his squiggly stuff.
Right here, what's known as a Klein bottle, but it won't come up as some curiosity or a trinket. It arises as a natural problem-solving tool. One of the earliest videos that I made for this channel was actually about this proof. And I'm making this video as a kind of second edition to that one. I realize second editions are much less of a thing for YouTube videos than they are for books, but...
Well, yeah. But if you think of this exact thing, and if I find out that they tell me in this that there's a triangle that doesn't enclose a square, then you have your answer. Add a few squiggles, and suddenly you can make the squiggly shape, and there is a proof that you absolutely can make a squiggle thing that does not have a square in it. Triangles. How extreme is the triangle? And how, is there any, like, what kind of shape of triangle is it? And angles greater than 90 degrees. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know why.
somehow or other draw a square. So I'm just going to roughly sketch it out. In this case, we can
The
see
angles
that,
are acute.
we have a rectangle that is slightly wider than it is high. So how can we get a square into this triangle using just a compass and straight edge that lies on this base and then touches the two sides? As mathematicians, before we start on actually constructing something, a good question to ask is, does this exist? How do we know we can get exactly a square instead of just a rectangle? So what we're going to do is actually use this idea of rectangles. So as mathematicians, sometimes we're looking for squares, but we can't find a square. So we relax the restriction and we start looking for rectangles. And then we hope we can find a rectangle where the height is equal to the base length, and then we know we have a square.
Yep.
So how can we get rectangles? Well, from the height of this triangle, we can just draw any parallel line to the base and then drop the perpendiculars, and we now get a rectangle. We see that this blue rectangle is now a lot higher than it is long. The green rectangle was a lot longer than it is high. So we hope that there's a square that lies somewhere in between this range.
As you sort of slide between the two.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's actually draw that out, what that looks like. So I'm going to draw a graph. Firstly, I'm using a ruler to measure stuff. So this isn't yet a purely straight edge and compass construction. So we're going to plot the height of the rectangles as they get lower and lower. So for now, I'm going to use my ruler to draw that out. So it's of about 4 units. So over here is going to be about 4 units. And at a height of 0, the height of the rectangle is 0. So what we have is a straight line here, representing the height of the rectangle. So now that we have the height of the rectangle, we're going to draw the width of the rectangle. When the height is at the full height, the width of the rectangle is 0. So we have a point down here. And when the height is at 0, we have the full length of the base, which means we're going to have a straight line here. And what happens at this point of intersection? Well, at this point of intersection, we know that the height of the rectangle is equal to the width of the rectangle, and so that gives us a square.
So we can do a square.
So we can do a square, and when we had the use of this ruler to transfer height and length around, we could find this is the height at which the square will occur. So if we have a proper construction,
Specifically for the type of triangle that is the angles that he started the whole premise.
the hope is that we can draw a square here.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll see if we actually can match that. Another trick that mathematicians use is that if they can't find a square, they actually force out a square. So how do I force out a square here? Is that it's hard to force a square in there, but I can draw a square down below. So using my compass and straight edge, I can actually draw a square. And we're going to use this to approximate a compass. So over here, we want to draw a square. It's going to come down to here. Over here, we want to draw a square. It's going to come down to about here. And so this gives us an approximate square. And actually, I do not need this ruler anymore, so I'm going to put it away and just use a straight edge. So we're going to continue this out and continue this out. And now what we have here is we have a square in this large triangle. So it's not quite the square that we want in this small triangle up here, but at least it's a square in a large triangle. What can we say about this small triangle and this large triangle? Because this edge moves down parallel, these two triangles are actually similar. So there's a mapping that brings us from this small triangle to this large triangle, and we can ask, what does the mapping do to this square?
Because you've got the square now.
Yes. So think about what happens to the base of this square as we expand the small triangle to the big triangle and as we contract it back. This base is actually just going to be a straight line through to the vertex of the original triangle. Likewise, over here, if we connect the vertex to this point, is how this point will move as we contract the triangle. So now the base of the large square goes over to these 2 points. And what that means is that we now have the base of a smaller square in this triangle up here. We just need to construct the perpendiculars, and this will give us our square.
Got it.
And as I mentioned earlier, we can compare it to this diagram on the right, and we can see that we are reasonably close to what the calculated answer is. Method 1, where we constructed the 2 lines that intersected each other to find the height of the square, and method 2, where we forced a square to get into this triangle. So now we're going to look at a third way. How else can we relax the restriction of the square? Instead of forcing all the vertex to line up perfectly on the edge of the triangle, maybe we could say, hey, let's just have the base of the square touching one side of the triangle. Okay, we can also continue drawing more squares
Yeah, but
and see what they
you're diverting from the idea that relates to the squiggle, but
look like.
the first part was related to the squiggle.
Okay, and so this figure of squares that are touching the side of this triangle, we hope we eventually will get to a square that does indeed touch this side of the triangle. If we can find such a point, we are done. And what we have here is that we again have our similar triangles. So we started out with this triangle, and we moved the base over, we got to this triangle. So what then does that tell us about these points
Yeah.
and the vertex of this triangle? Is that these 3 points will form a straight line. So we could connect up these 3 points and see where it intersects the other side of the triangle. And then from here, we know if we drop the perpendicular and we drop the parallel line, that will give us a square.
Ah, that's almost simpler than the other one.
That is indeed simpler than the other one. And, both of these use the same idea of similarity.
Yeah.
All right, so we're back on the first diagram. And remember, what we wanted to do is start off by constructing a square. So I'm going to just quickly measure off
Hmm.
Okay, and we said that the vertex of the triangle and this corner of our now relaxed square, we want to extend this line, and we can see that, hey, it does go through this other point on the triangle. That's pretty amazing.
Look how happy you look. You're very happy with yourself.
That
So
is
we
cool.
have 3 different methods here, and they all agree on this one point to give us the square. We drop the perpendicular, we drop the parallel line, and we form our square in this triangle.
Yeah.
Wild.
However, that works for the one type of triangle. But what I'm trying to say is it possible to do that with a different type of triangle with different angles? And that doesn't exactly, unfortunately, this is too much of a regular triangle. What about other types? And then you find, yes, there's this one. Again, where the lines of this are 90 degrees, you end up obviously always being able to create a square. So when the lines are greater than 90 degrees, it's my assumption that you would be able to put in maybe a little wiggle, and then you have your shape with the wiggles that is like generally a triangle with greater than 90 degrees. And the question then becomes, is it possible to have a square in one of those triangles? And that other video did not satisfy that question, unfortunately. So, I mean, as good as it was, this is the other thing. So find a square located inside of a right triangle. Again, the other one wasn't a right triangle, was it? Actually, I think it was. The difference is, I mean, this is an obvious right triangle transformation. What the other one was a right triangle, but on its as a pyramid instead of on its diagonal like this, or on its like you can understand that what they did here was it's a right triangle. However, it is right because that's what's happening on one of the points is that there is a 90-degree right and the 45 and the 45. Right? That's what they did in Numberphile. What this guy is doing is having it so that it is the 90-degree is on the bottom and side instead of on the top. Right? Like flip the shape for yourself and you can see like that the exact same shape. The obvious difference is that with the right triangle, what if you make the like you have a right triangle, right? What if you have one, yeah, where with this one, they do talk about the lengths being different. So one is length 24, and the other one's length 16. There's still a square in that. So if I twist that around in my head, it almost looks like a greater than 90 degrees triangle. It's not exactly the same shape because they have different lengths. The pin is over to a bit of a side, but that's not the point. Although it does prove that is a thing. But again, what if there is not there's 4 easy methods. This video was done differently and 2 years ago, so it's more recent, advanced, up to date. I was gonna say, but recent. And again, what if it's a greater than 90 degrees triangle? Ah. See, this is a similar type of thing. But again, that's a right angle triangle because I can tell from twisting my head to the side that the C is still like the angles are still but then okay, what do I really mean? Is there anything other than a right angle triangle in the universe? Clearly there must be like an equilateral, right? All of the angles being equal. That would be isosceles. That's the other words for a triangle. A triangle unit is square. See, that's almost more interesting, but easier to do because there are more places for it to intersect and stuff. And also, that's an equal triangle in a square. But what we want is the opposite. but I can already see a square inside the equal triangle. But what would I'm still thinking about isosceles. And here's the thing. The three square problem. Geometry problem. There was a question that was posed, I believe by Numberphile, or conveyed, because obviously it existed before Numberphile. But can you, with just a, like, what's the word for the thing? It's that 2 points with one of those and a ruler. Can you make a three intersected line something? And the answer is, of course you can. And I give an answer to that also 10 years ago. Holy crap. Yeah. Again, you're dealing with right angle triangles. That's not important. That's not my question. Again, right angle. Can anyone get interesting and show me a freaking, like, anything other than a right angle and then this is an equilateral? Of course you can do that. I can visualize it, and there it is in front of us. There is the equilateral with, I think it's equilateral. Why am I hung up on this idea that isosceles would be any different? Math Booster, I've never heard of you. But it's interesting to think about the area of the square, but we're not looking about the area of the square. We're looking at, can you create a square in a triangle? And that's the same question, or it's a very similar question to, can you do the squiggle thing and always find a triangle, always find a square, because the triangle is the simplest way that you can mess that up, and yet we find answers. So that's a much easier way to prove it, instead of going into all the stuff that I mean, I like what he did, but there are easier proofs out there. But I'm still looking for that isosceles triangle. Solution hint in video. No, go away. Give a hint. Give an answer. Okay, so I took a stab at this, and everyone shows up with right angle triangles. They are the favorite type. They are these simple things. And then you got this. No one knows this. We just saw this. Or we saw a lot of this. And this problem taught me what topology is. It's so weird, because topology is, like, fascinating and everything. It's just that it's weird how people get 4D cubes wrong. And that leads me to believe that there has to be some solution, and the triangle was the simplest way I could think of to break this puzzle wide open. But I can't. In looking for this square inside of a triangle, I find this. square inside of an abstract shape, which you would think is not related to it. Again, equilateral or right angle. But there's a third type of triangle, isosceles. Why is no one shows the isosceles? I'm not wrong here. Equal. You literally have a square as the point saying it is equal. It's again not. But here's the thing, all right? Isosceles nuts. Let's just say that the relationship between a regular square and any other type of triangle, it doesn't matter if it's equal or right angle triangle, this is just another right angle triangle, which is annoying me that I can't find isosceles anywhere. But to effect, the answer is probably that as long as you go along the line of one of the edges of the triangle, you do have a straight line to work with. And then the other two lines only need one point on any given of the 2 points throughout the lines. So then transforming isosceles triangle with the squiggles, can you do it in such a way to eliminate the square? That's the real full proof of the proof of the proof. If it can be done, then if you can eliminate the square in an isosceles triangle based squiggle by adding certain squiggles, is there any way you can do that and whatever? And yeah, he said it was interesting about hard angle squiggles, and also the problem with the fractal he presented was that fractal has infinite dimensions or infinite length. Like it keeps on continuing that weird pattern until smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Imagining that you had that same pattern, but it's like the universe is the size of the big shape, and as you keep on zooming into any bit of it, it's the same shape. Going deep, 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 deep. And it's like that's fascinating. The fractals are fascinating, but freaking, I need anyone to show me isosceles triangle. Is that one? It's not equilateral. And wait, you can't fool me. No, it's not equal. None of them are equal. So that's neat. Or what? Yeah, that triangles are so simple in the fact that depending on how you like, it's all about the angles of whatever thing. And again, the square just needs to hug whatever one line you want. Apparently, is the always solution of everything. Like everyone comes to that solution, just hug one line, and the two and whatever dots are on the other line, then you have a square inside of a triangle of whatever type. It doesn't matter if it's right angle, really. It doesn't matter. However, the area finding of that is not what we're looking for. We're just trying to make sure that there is a square in any given triangle, and I think there is. Why do atoms actually look like this? I think I told you that in a different video. Maybe go look at that one. It's fascinating. It was something about electrons going at 500 trillion RPM around an atom. But yeah, that's a thing. Or it's, don't quote me on it, but it's like it's about that. It's the speed versus the area of an orbit of an electron. I based it off the math of the speed of the electron, which is 2.2 thousand kilometers per second. And we all know 1,000 kilometers per second is just 2.2 million meters per second, which is a fraction of the speed of light. However, it's like 150. Give a little bit of difference between it. And so, but also relative to the area of an atom, which is a tenth of a nanometer raised to the power of millions of meters, 2 million meters, that's how you get it. Yeah, it orbits 500 trillion times every second, approximately. I mean, give or take, like it's more than a trillion times a second, and it's less than 3 quadrillion times a second. Right? It's in that ballpark. Let's say 500 trillion and call it a day, because if you think about going that fast per second, but you realize, so the instantaneous that it goes around the atom, it also bumps into itself. So it has to veer off and go in a different line at the same time. So it's not that you see all these different parts and you think of that as electron, like you, what is it? There's still only one electron in that, right? There's still only one electron in all of this. So why does it make sense? Because, again, if it's going 2.2 quadrillion meters per second, or quadrillion, no, not meters per second, 2.2 quadrillion atomic widths per second, which is a tenth of a nanometer, approximately. Right? Then you take that entire length and spool that in, you end up finding how it keeps wrapping and warping, and it is in all these positions in that second. It's in every one of these positions in that second. Every single one of these is one electron. It's just that it did exist there in every of those positions, but it's moving so fast that it was there, it showed itself, and then it moved on before you. It's like if you spin a plate or a turnabout and you have a piece of tape on the turnabout, it'll show as a line because of persistence of vision. But if you were to freeze frame somehow, scanning extremely fast, such that you can see each of the different instances where it existed along that line that you can see, then you would see it as a bunch of copies like this. Right? That's what's happening with the electron. The only difference is it also varies in a bit of height. Because of its interaction with itself. And that's what a lot of people don't get with electrons. And I want to school people on this. And somehow I got there with triangles again. And I always talk about electrons because people get it wrong. And I'm sad about that because they need to get it right. Or any of these I saw, it doesn't matter. There is a square in any of these triangles, every one of these triangles. And whatever the fuck this shape is. It's got four sides. It's not a rectangle or a square because the angles are not right angles and whatever you understand. Doesn't matter. Yeah, and I can see the square within this triangle or that triangle. Either one. And of course this one because it's illustrated. So I can see those squares already, regardless of any shape, any of the angles that the triangle is made of. So knowing that, the answer to the original question about the squiggles is made obvious without needing any of that other analysis and higher dimensional thought whatsoever. I just thought of a triangle base idea, and it's like, yeah, squares can be found inside every triangle. Hey, prove me wrong, and then you also know that the squiggle thing is wrong. So there you go. Thanks for hanging out with me. I like it when you do. Check out the rest of the stuff that I do about science and all the stuff that is to do with maybe my gaming, because game is also fun and whatever. And I'll see you in the next video and stuff. Toodles. Wrong button.
Consider a right triangle with